We'll be picking this up on the other side, where we'll go deeper into the symbolism of the Hypercube and see some examples of how it's used in the modern world. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back on What on Earth is Happening. The Hypercube, the subject of today's discussion on What on Earth is Happening. The ultimate symbol of the dark occultists. And they use it in a lot of places in modern society, as we'll be seeing coming up shortly. We're looking at image number 7 on the radio show page of whatonearthishappening.com, showing the three-dimensional rendering of the Hypercube alongside its 2D projection. And I was explaining the worldview of the dark occult, seeing everything as separate, and in addition to that, seeing the physical world as inferior to the spiritual dimension, when in fact these things are one in the same. Everything is spiritual. There is nothing that can exist outside of the one, of the all. It is all one thing, experiencing itself. We need to get out of the dualistic nature of thinking about us versus them, and that is derived from thinking about everything in the universe as being separate from everything else, when in fact, again, they are all entangled, inextricably, bound to each other and affecting each other. As a result of this poisonous worldview that the dark occultists hold, they see the entire universe as a prison, and that is the outer cube, the cube of base matter imprisoning the soul or the spirit. And in their rage about this, because they do not wish to be bound by natural law, they look at that as a prison, not something that is there for the benefit of their evolutionary development, which it is. They take the approach that this is simply the realm of hell, I'm eternally trapped here, and because I loathe and detest that situation, I'm going to take the approach of that it is better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Therefore, I am going to become Lord and Master of this prison, put everybody else into a deeper level of control than I am even at, and become their owners, rulers, and ultimately their God. That is their mindset to a T. And I could care less who believes that in all actuality. I know that that's the case from having been around some of these individuals, from having been at a very, very low level, exhibiting all of the qualities that they do myself in my past. And it needing to take years of intensive suffering to the point of absolute hitting rock bottom in utter depression and isolation for me to say, hey, for me to say to myself, hey, you think this way of thinking isn't working for you? You think just maybe? Because ultimately, that's what these people feel like all the time. That is what they feel like all the time. And their life's goal is to make people feel as miserable and horrific as they do inside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is their mission. That is their life's goal. And they're doing a great job of it. I have to commend them. I have to give them all the props that they so rightfully deserve. They're doing their work. Very successfully, I might add, because morons among the human population are all too happy to help them do it, because they have no self-respect. And you think that's harsh? I could really care less. Again, as I said, I don't do this show to make friends with people. It's not a popularity contest. I'm not worried about who I'm going to offend by speaking the truth. I'm not here to be your friend. I'm here to tell you what's actually taking place in the world, hence the title of the show. People want things sugar-coated and spoken in sweet and nice tones, like spoon-feeding a little baby or bottle-feeding a baby. Well, sometimes you just have to buck up and understand what's really going on around you and become an adult about it and employ some will, some free will in relation to the nature of the situation. So I make no apologies when I, say things straightforwardly, and if they need to be said harshly, then they're said harshly. So going back to what the hypercube represents, the inner cube represents the mind prison that the dark occultists want to create, the world of mind control. So they're putting people in a smaller box than they are in. And that's the only way that they can control people. That's it. They understand the higher nature of the reality that we're living in. They loathe, detest, and despise it. And therefore, they want to keep people's consciousness in a smaller box than that so that it can be controlled. And hence, the box within the box. The cube within the cube. If we look at the two-dimensional projection in red in this image number 7, again, this is the extruded cube or the hypercube as seen in two-dimensional space. Okay? What we are actually seeing here is an octagon. If we just take the outline of this shape, it forms an octagonal or 8-sided figure. The octagon is one of the ways the dark occultists employ the concept, the symbolic concept of the hypercube in their usage of symbolism. Another way that they employ the usage of the hypercube, okay, because they're not going to represent it in the way that you see it there to the left, as a cube inside of another cube with the lines connecting the corners of the cube. People would immediately recognize that as a hypercube. So they want to be a little bit more subtle than that. You might start asking questions if you saw that image of a hypercube everywhere. But you take away most of its lines and look at it from a 2D projection, take away most of the lines in that projection, and then you use it as an octagon, hardly anybody asks any questions. Another way that it is looked at is two boxes, which are often depicted as being right on top of each other, or sometimes depicted as turned at 90-degree angles to each other. Or I should say 45-degree angles to each other. Okay? So two squares, one rotated at a 45-degree angle on top of each other, or boxes. This is a representation of the hypercube. Okay? Two-dimensional realities intertwined. The third dimension intersecting into the fourth dimension. Okay? Now, this is where a lot of the dark occultists say that they are connected to and derive some of their power from. And I would say it's where they're being controlled by as well. Because you think that human beings are at the top of all of the control and the hierarchy and the mind control that's going on. They are controlled puppets themselves. Doesn't matter how high you go into the hierarchy in human form, there is something beyond it. A caller called in and asked this question, what I think is the highest level of this hierarchical control system. Does it go beyond human? I said, yeah, it goes beyond human. It goes into the realm of principality and higher dimensions. And just it comes to a point where it's all based on the same force, one force called fear. Because you have to be in fear to be a puppet. Period. So ultimately, does it matter who's controlling it at the highest end? No, it does not. The game is always played the same through fear. That's the method to get into the mind in order to control it. And ultimately, all of these controllers, no matter what level of the system they operate at, are all fearful little children in their actual psychological and spiritual makeup. We'll be right back, folks.